Hi, and welcome to Empathy for the Devil. This season is brought to you in partnership with London Records.
In telling Jimi Hendrix's story, we will discuss childhood neglect, poverty, alcohol addiction, and the early loss of a parent. We'll also touch on drug use and overdose. There will be resources in the show notes for you to check out if you're affected by any of the issues we are discussing today. Hi, welcome to the last episode of Empathy for the Devil Season 2. How are you feeling?
I can't believe it's the last episode already.
It's gone so quickly, hasn't it?
It really has, yeah.
Do you know what I really like? I really like coming into town every Thursday and seeing you guys, and it's all just exciting and brilliant. And I don't know, it's just a really good thing to do. I'm going to miss it.
I know, and the team as well. We've got a lovely team behind the cameras and everything, and we're really going to miss them.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. It's been really fun.
Yeah. It has been absolutely brilliant. But already thinking about season 3.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, there's so many people, aren't there? Unfortunately, and we were spoiled for choice. Really, it's difficult to decide who to speak about. But I think we got some good ones in this season.
But I'm looking forward to this one. So what we got, Chula?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to be ending the season with Jimi Hendrix.
Way, wow.
Who, as far as I'm concerned, is the best guitarist that's ever lived.
Oh.
And I dare anyone to challenge me on that.
I'd like to challenge you on that.
Really?
Yeah.
She's going to say Hank Marvin.
All right, go on then. Try and name a guitarist that is better than Jimi Hendrix.
I'm going to say Hank Marvin. That's because I've got a Hank Marvin story. Just quickly. My dad was a massive, what are they called? Shadows fan.
Yeah.
And when I was a little girl, my dad played guitar, and I would sit at his knees and look up and watch him play guitar and think he was amazing. And he just used to play Shadows songs over and over again, only then surpassed by the Dire Straits period, circa 86.
Sorry to tell you this, but Hank Marvin wasn't in Dire Straits.
No, he wasn't in Dire Straits, but Mark Knopfler was, and that was his second best guitarist.
Okay.
Well, are these the contenders you're putting forward?
Oh.
David Gilmour? Come on.
Eric Clapton?
Really? No.
Some might say John Frusciante as well, actually. My daughter certainly would.
Well, I would say that all of those people, and people like Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend, you know, they're all a very, very, very close second. But I don't think anyone tops Hendrix, really, for
Seriously?
me. Yeah, for me, the flow of his playing and the fact that he was able to become one with his instrument. I mean, he just melts into his guitar and it becomes an extension of his body. And then what comes out of it, I mean, I just don't think anyone has been able to surpass it.
Even Prince?
Ever. No.
My first album was a Jimi Hendrix album.
Oh, right.
I think it was Band of Gypsies, which was a live album.
Yeah.
And boy, that excitement that I used to get just from flicking it on. And I still feel like whenever I hear a Hendrix track, it's like just that, the drama and the excitement, and there's just a surge of adrenaline that doesn't come close.
Yeah. I mean, one of my first albums was Electric Ladyland.
I was just going to say, I've got, what's that? What's the one?
Fire.
Yeah, that's my ringtone on my phone.
Oh, right. Okay. Great song. Great
Drum
groove.
break
Is that why you never answer
true.
your phone, Sam? Because you're too busy listening to the
letting it ring
ringtone.
out.
Yeah, no, just not to you, Matt.
Enjoying the ringtone. Thanks.
Well, there's a really cool story about Hendrix when he first came to London in 1966. He was 23 and he had managed to wangle playing with Eric Clapton, one of his heroes' bands, Cream. And he was invited on stage to play a couple of songs, and he got up there and he played this version of Killing Floor by Howlin' Wolf. And it was so good, apparently Clapton's hands just dropped down from his guitar. He walked off stage before the song was even finished. And then Chaz Chandler, who was the guy, Jimmy's mentor, had kind of got him over. He was backstage and he said to him, "Is he that fucking good?" Like, you know, he was blown away.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet he had the ump a bit as well.
Yeah, I imagine there was a bit of a hump there, for sure. But in the short years that followed, Hendrix changed the face of rock music, creating new soundscapes and redefining guitar playing forever. But who was the man behind the legend? In this episode, we'll go beyond the mythology of Jimi Hendrix and explore the hard-working, impressionable young man who became the ultimate rock icon, what motivated his relentless drive to innovate, and what led him to his tragically early death at 27 years old.
Whoa.
Oh, so young.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it, Chula.
Me too.
Yeah.
So could you light a candle for us?
I can light a candle. So we're going to light the candle for you, Jimmy. I love that name, Jimmy. It's nice. What a handsome, talented, cool motherfucker. Did I say that with Prince? Maybe I did. I can't remember.
They both are.
Were. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. And I just want to light this candle to honour you, my friend. There we go.
Thank you, Sam.
Nice one, Sam.
So,
Okay.
the story begins. He was born in 1942 on November the 27th, and he was named John Allen. And his mother, Lucille, and father, Al, were very, very young. So she was 17 and he was 23.
Whoa.
And they're primarily of African-American descent, but there was also some Native American and Irish heritage in there on the paternal side. The paternal great-great-grandmother was a Cherokee woman and was married to an Irishman.
Wow.
Yeah, so some real history in his lineage there. And Jimmy, he was called Johnny at the time. He didn't actually meet his dad until 1945, till he was about 3, because his father was in the army in Alabama.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, during the war.
And so his mother was left with him, and she was really so young that there's stories about her finding it quite difficult. And she was a bit unprepared to be the sort of housewife stroke mother and waiting for her husband to come home from war.
Yeah.
And they lived in poverty. They lived in very damp housing, and Jimmy was treated for pneumonia on several occasions.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, his mother was also known to have alcohol issues. So it was a tough first few years for Jimmy. Lucille even had other relationships while Al was away, once with a man who apparently physically abused her, and she ended up in hospital. Jimmy was often left with other people, relatives, or sometimes Lucille's mother. And there's a daughter of a local family whose house she cleaned. And she had this memory of Jimmy's grandmother bringing him as a baby along with a diaper full of urine that had frozen over.
Ooh.
Yeah, and was leaving pockmarks on his skin.
Hang on a minute. That's not good.
No,
That's
awful.
very, very bad.
Yeah, very bad.
So she was 17 when she had Jimmy.
Yeah,
So between 17 and 20,
yeah,
she was, her husband was away.
yes.
I guess what I'm thinking is she wasn't ready to be a mother. No shit, that's because she's a kid.
Yeah, she was a child.
That's because she's a
She
child.
was really young, really
Yeah.
young.
You know, you were talking about how the house was really damp, and how a very young Jimmy suffered from pneumonia.
Yeah, a few times apparently.
I was reading something, I think it was in that book by John Savage, about the link between performers who go on to become shamanistic type performers, kind of like real, like transcendental performances, and childhood illness.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we've talked about a couple on this very podcast.
Yeah.
But it almost seems like Jimi Hendrix would fall into that category as well, because he was certainly a kind of shamanistic, transcendental type performance.
Yeah.
And clearly, he suffered from disease as a childhood as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've had pneumonia and it is awful.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine what it would have been like for a baby to experience that. There must have been some sort of out-of-body type experience or sensation to it, because it really is awful. And you can understand that there might be a self-protective factor that takes a child into another sense of perception to get it through the difficulty.
Especially when accompanied by adversity and poverty, and sounds like extreme weather as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think what I'd quite like to do is to not put all the blame on the mother. You weren't, by the way.
No.
I just want to, she's a kid and she's living in poverty. She's just had a baby, and they're a black family and they're probably experiencing racism and they've probably got shit housing and the opportunities for work and education are not there, etc., etc., etc. So there's a lot of social factors that are going on as well that contributed to this sort of horrible situation Jimmy grew up in.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the most profound traumas, I think, on top of what we were just talking about, is the breaking of that mother-baby bond, you know, because she wasn't able to be fully present. And I think that really impacted on him, as it does with all children when that happens.
So how long did they live together?
I think he was fostered off to California for a while before his dad came back.
Oh, right.
And then his dad went and got him and then came back to Lucille.
Right, so there was a family unit for a while.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Between the ages of 3 to 9, there was a family unit. But it was unfortunately quite unhappy. The relationship between the parents was quite fraught. And so Al had been discharged from the army. And when he got Jimmy, or as he was called at that point, Johnny, he decided that he wanted to call him James. So that was when his name changed.
Johnny, James, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there was a lot of alcohol involved. So both the parents were drinking, both Lucille and Al were drinking and struggling with alcohol. And then there was a birth of a second child, Jimmy's brother Leon. And then there was a third son, but this was too much for them. So the third son went straight into foster care. And then after that, 1950 and 1951, there were 2 daughters. But those 3 siblings all got taken away. So Jimmy didn't have a chance to form a bond with them, unfortunately.
And that must have created quite a vacuum in the family at that stage. The knowing that a baby was coming and then the baby not being there anymore and disappearing. For that to happen 3 times would have been quite an emotional vacuum, wouldn't it?
Sure, and it just sounds very chaotic, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it must have been really bad for that to happen. But then on top of that, there was the trauma of having to give the children away. And then Jimmy and Leon losing their siblings, or not getting a chance to even know them.
And I wonder how that was explained to them at the time.
Oh, gosh, I can't even think. What would you say?
And as a psychotherapist, if you had somebody in your therapy room presenting with something like that from their childhood, what would you make of that?
Well, I think it would be about looking at what the individual feels the impact has been for them. So that would be the starting point. And inevitably, you then get into sort of discussions about, well, have you searched for them? Are you interested in searching for them? What do you feel about it? What would bring you healing around it? So it would really be very person-centered in terms of the approach, because you'd want to look at what was going on for that individual, because different people will react to it differently. So in 1951, the parents divorced and Al actually won custody of Jimmy, which is, I imagine at that time was quite rare, because usually children were placed with the mother. So he was trying to look after these 2 boys, and when things got tough, then Leon would be fostered out, but Jimmy would stay with him. So Jimmy bore the brunt of all the difficulties, and you can see that in his story. Jimmy became quite an aloof, shy kind of character. He suffered from a stutter for several years and became very introverted. In fact, my take on it is that it was pain turned inwards, you know, and I think with children who experience trauma, often they either turn it outwards and they, you know, children can become very difficult or even violent. And then other children will turn it in on themselves. And it looked like he was the kind that went in on himself.
That was my story. I was people thought I was a snob, whereas actually I was just too shy to talk to anyone.
It's funny, isn't it, that that we interpret shyness as that person thinks they're better than me. I wonder why that is.
Well, it's probably a defense, isn't it? It's like, why isn't that person engaging? Oh, they must think they're better than me.
I think that's because we want warmth in return. So if we're extending, we want someone to reciprocate that. And if they don't, it's our own insecurities that project that.
I was going to say, because so the first thought about what's going on in that relationship or what that person's like is, I am less than. That's the assumption, isn't it? Rather than thinking, obviously now I used to think that all the time. But as an adult now, when I see people behave in what could be interpreted as aloof, my first thought now is, they have trouble with being in this space.
There's something
about
for
this
them.
space for them that is uncomfortable, so they're withdrawing.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to think, actually, they might not be acting like a dick. They might just be feeling really shy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might not be about me after all.
They could always be a dick, though.
Well, that's true.
Right,
That's true.
Especially if it's you, Sam.
So, moving on, in 1957, Lucille remarried, and Jimmy was about 14 or 15. And in 1958, she died of liver cirrhosis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, age 32.
Oh my God.
And that must have been a double whammy because of what we talked about before, the kind of the additional stigma on women who are alcoholics. Let alone men who are alcoholics.
Yeah.
But if you're a woman, that's double tarnished, isn't it? Especially around those times.
Yeah. And to add to that, unfortunately, Jimmy's father didn't let him go to the funeral. So he didn't get closure.
What's your perspective on children going to funerals of people that are important to them?
Oh, I think it's important. I think it's very important. It might be incredibly intense for the child, might even be overwhelming, but I think that there's a ritualistic element to it that supports the spiritual journey of loss. And I think that's really important. I work with a surprising amount of people who have lost parents prematurely. And one of the things we often work on is, well, how have you retained your connection? Apart from what closure did you get, but how have you retained your connection? And sometimes what I do is I say to people, well, what would you like to do? And people choose different things. Sometimes it's a place just to go. Sometimes some people even build a small shrine. For some people, it's just a photo of the parent on their phone. It can be really simple things, but it's about supporting that closure, but also keeping the spiritual connection.
And what I'm hearing for Jimmy in this situation is that there was none of that. There was just shame. There was just a lot of shame around what had happened.
Yeah. I mean, he would have just been a confused young teenager, I imagine, in a lot of pain, losing his mother, but then never really having had the chance to have a proper relationship with her. He was distraught by his mother's death, and he on some level he idealized her, and it was then that he found music. So it was around that time that he found music, and you could even say that music became his secure attachment, or was his transitional object from individuating away from being a child and into being an adult, or being self-sufficient, maybe.
What do you mean by transitional object?
So a transitional object is usually something very simple, like a teddy bear or a safety blanket that very small babies have to when they're separating from the mother.
Right. Or a dummy.
Okay.
Can be a dummy,
Okay.
And it helps them to kind of, because when babies are first born, they think they are part of the mother and the mother is part of them. But then as they realise that they're separate, then it helps to have a transitional object. And obviously you wouldn't want a child to hold on to that for too long, nor would you want to take it away from them too soon. There's a natural process with it, and then they let it go. And with Jimmy, he didn't really have anything secure in his life at all, by the sounds of it. So music became something that he transitioned into, and I imagine helped him to then transition into being an adult.
Right.
I've got a transitional object story.
Oh, God, here we go.
Yeah, of course I have. I was working with a very young artist, and because of the travel, there's loads of travel, so that we were up early and, up late and on planes going all over the world. Anyway, one day he said to me that he thought he might be a bit in love with me.
Ooh,
and
Sam.
I was much older. Much younger than I am now, but much older then. And I then was at therapy and said, there's this thing that's happened. And, I was really like, oh my God, I'm just obviously so cool and beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And he really likes me and blah, blah, blah. And she just went, She went, you're what we call a transitional object, Sam. I went, what do you mean? And she went, well, you're not really mummy, but you're not mummy.
Right.
You're sort of an in-betweeny.
Ooh, kind of takes the romance out of it, doesn't it?
Mate, I can't even tell you. My ego just went, it was like popping a massive air balloon.
It's called a passion killer, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just fell to the floor.
Ooh,
flop.
dear.
And how did he make that first connection with music? Because obviously a lot of people, Amy and Prince, there was a lot of exposure to music at home.
Yeah.
How did not Prince, wrong episode. How did Jimmy, what happened?
Well, we're not really sure what it was that was the primary influences, but the story is that he had a broom that he used to wear as a guitar and pretend to play it and take it everywhere with him.
How old was he when he was doing that? Do we know?
I think this was probably before his mum died, or it may have been around the same time.
Feels like when he was little, almost like 10, I'm imagining.
It feels like it would have been in the 50s, and there were a lot of TV shows. There was like the Ed Sullivan Show, and there were also a lot of local TV shows. So he might have seen one of those original guitar heroes on the Ed Sullivan Show even.
Yeah. And funnily enough, I did a similar thing, but with a tennis racket. So I had a tennis racket where I clipped some of the strings going across, attached a string to it so I could wear it like a guitar. And I used to pretend to be playing guitar.
Amazing.
And then just
Who were you pretending to be?
I was probably...
Jimi Hendrix?
No, I was probably pretending to be someone from Iron Maiden. I imagine at that time. Yeah.
I mean, you left them out of your best guitarist of all time, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually, but still not as good as Hendrix.
Adrian Harris?
Great guitarist, but Hendrix tops him.
Sorry, Iron Maiden.
Yeah, sorry about that. So eventually he managed to get a guitar, and according to Leon, his dad bought it from a friend who was stoned for like $5. And it was around the time of his mother's death that happened, that he got his guitar. So just to sum up, Jimmy's beginning, his teenage years, or up to his teenage years, he's had very unfortunate circumstances. There's been lots of difficulty in terms of alcoholism, poverty, and all the things he grew up with, parents separating and then losing his mother. So I just wanted to bring in the concept of ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. We've got the 12-step fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And as we know, that's expanded to things like Codependents Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous and Debtors Anonymous, all these different fellowships. And we've had Al-Anon, which was generally for family members of alcoholics. But then out of that has sprung something called ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics.
It's actually weirdly now been further expanded to Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And I think that's because it's, for some reason, been a really successful program. It's worked really well for people. And it's a 12-step program for children of addicts and alcoholics, or anyone really from a dysfunctional family. And it focuses on the sort of commonalities in terms of symptoms that people can suffer with. Some of them being self-esteem, hypervigilance, codependency, sometimes being a bit controlling because there's a need to control a chaotic environment. So those kind of traits can be healed really with a program, and ACA is really good at doing that.
So we would have Jimmy firmly in the ACA camp.
Yes, I think if we had met Jimmy when he was, in his music career and he needed help, then we probably would have pointed him in the direction of ACA, for sure. So the next part of Jimmy's story is when he turned 17, he enlisted in the army. He went to join the airborne paratroopers, and he actually left after 13 months. There is a rumor that he broke his ankle, and that was the reason why he was discharged. But the important thing is that he got out before the Vietnam War, because if he had stayed, that's where he would have been sent.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But he met a fellow serviceman, a guy called Billy Cox, who was a bass player, and they started performing together.
In a band?
Well, I think they started doing lots of backing stuff. Okay. So he worked as a backing guitarist for lots of different people.
So hang on, sorry to interrupt, but was he a proficient guitarist by then? He taught himself how to play?
Apparently he practiced so much that by the time he got to that age, he could, he was known for having his guitar everywhere he went in the army. Even.
Right, okay.
So he could play well enough to get the work.
Got it.
Yeah.
And how old was he at this point when him and Billy, whatever his name is?
Must have been 18, 19.
Okay,
late
teens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just after he came out of the army. And then he started getting paid for working as a musician, but he didn't really have a grasp on how to maintain his money. He would like go to bars and like blow his entire pay and like buy everyone drinks and stuff like that. And several friends quoted that he also became quite violent and angry when he drank. Yeah. So maybe there was an element of what was in, you know, genetically passed down. Maybe it was the pain that was being converted into anger. You know, who's to know now? But there was definitely alcohol issues, you know, in his family with both his parents. And he fell foul to them too.
Well, that rage is going to come out some way, and if it didn't happen when he was 15, as soon as what it sounds like is that, you know, when he was less inhibited and worried about what people thought of him, that's when it all came out.
And, you know, he played with some big names. He played with B.B. King, Sam Cooke, Tina Turner, Jackie Wilson.
Oh, wow.
But then he got bored of it. He got bored of playing behind people.
I'm not surprised if you're Jimi Hendrix and you're standing behind Sam Cooke. It's like, no.
And he wanted to be creative. That was the thing. He wanted to come out. And then he ends up in New York. And he was in New York and he meets Linda Keith, who was Keith Richards' girlfriend. And she introduces him to Chaz Chandler, who we spoke about earlier, who was the bass player of the Animals. And he invites him to England. So at the age of 23, 1966, he arrives in England. So that kind of move at 23, you know, to move continents into a totally new environment, is quite a massive thing to do. And I think there was a lot of curiosity on his part, but there were things propelling him as well, because he wasn't quite fitting into the music scene back in the US. He was kind of like straddling a lot of different kind of genres, but not really fitting into one.
Where are we talking about now?
He's a black guy playing a fucking rock guitar.
Exactly.
That's probably why, which is the same issue Prince had, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So he was in between things and not really, I suppose, feeling accepted. And then this offer came along and he went. And it was also there, I think, from a very young age, because it goes back to this quote from when he was 8 years old. And apparently he told his mum's friend, when I get big, I'm going far, far away and I'm never coming back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, as you said, he went, he said, yeah, I'll go to London.
Yeah.
I was thinking, God, that kid had stars in his eyes, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. And he was running away from his past as well.
So how well known was he in America at the stage that he went to London?
I don't think he was well known as a solo artist, but he was known in musician circles.
Okay.
But yeah, the public didn't know who he was. I didn't know that. I just assumed when Jimi Hendrix came to London, he was Jimi Hendrix in America.
Yeah.
But no.
But, you know, he took London by storm, really.
Right.
And after that incident with Clapton, you know, people were thinking, you know, this guy's amazing. So people like Brian Jones, Eric Clapton, you know, Paul McCartney, Pete Townsend, they all thought he was amazing.
And it's interesting that they were all white guys who kind of learnt their craft from studying the previous generation of black guitar players.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, what a fucking scene to walk into. I mean, can you imagine walking into London, the fashion, the fucking haircuts, the music, the everything is just absolutely going off. Yeah. And in walks Jimmy, American, beautiful,
super stylish,
not just handsome, like fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
And he must have been like this sort of tropical bird that kind of sort of landed in London, and everybody looking at him going, fucking hell.
Yeah, and then his performances, you know, not only is he this stunningly good guitar player, but he's playing it with his teeth, he's playing it behind his head, he's setting it on fire.
Like, fucking hell. I bet all the girls were like, hang on a minute, who's that? Please.
Yeah, and you know, he was seemed to be really confident about his guitar playing, but funnily enough, he was never confident about his singing.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
You had such a great voice.
Yeah, he always felt quite shy about it. And even when he was recording vocals, apparently he used to get a board put up so that, you know, people couldn't see him singing. And he would sometimes do multiple takes to try and get it right, even though everyone else thought it was perfectly fine. You know? And he forms the band The Jimi Hendrix Experience with Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell.
Mitch Mitchell. Now there's a drummer.
Oh, I love Mitch Mitchell. I mean, I was listening to Jimmy on the way in, and like those two were glued together, weren't they? They? You know, they just move with each other in perfect synchronicity. And he's got that kind of rolling style, you know, of drumming that just fitted really well with what Jimmy was doing.
The song Fire is basically one long drum roll, isn't it? I mean, whoa.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the debut album, Are You Experienced, was released in May 1967.
Who was he signed to? Who put that out?
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, I can tell you that.
Really?
Yeah, Kit Lambert and his partner, whose name escapes me, who managed The Who at the time, they signed him.
So that probably built the label for them.
I'd imagine, yeah. I don't know much about it. It's something worth looking into, maybe for another episode.
Yeah, well, it's one of the most popular rock albums of all time, and it kind of established the sort of psychedelic rock scene, you know, in that day. And, you know, Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, Wind Cries Mary. You know, it was followed 7 months later by Axis Bold as Love. Wow. And then the third album, which is my favourite, Electric Ladyland, came the following year, 1968. He would go on to spend 2 more years working on a fourth studio album, but that never came out because he died before it was completed. Yeah.
So are we saying 3 albums in 3 years?
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'm just thinking about him playing at Woodstock and Prince Rogers Nelson going there with his dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he also played at a festival where Brian Jones introduced him on stage when he went back to America.
Wow.
They went back to America, and it was the Monterey Rock Festival, I think, and was introduced by one Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones.
It's interesting how these stories interconnect.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. And, you know, he was a very hard-working individual, somewhat of a perfectionist. And as we know from our work, you know, sometimes perfectionism can come in line with people who want to sort of control things and control outcomes and control their environments. And that often comes from traumas where control's been taken away, such as ACA with alcoholic parents. And he found it difficult to say no to people. So another thing we've talked about in terms of codependency and wanting to please people.
People pleasing.
Yeah. You know, and there were tensions in the group that were sort of rising because they were so overworked and because he was perfectionistic and trying to sort of strive. And
what was he like? What was his temperament like?
Well, he liked having people around, and apparently the studio was always full of people who shouldn't have even been there, who weren't musicians, just hangers-on who he couldn't say no to.
Right, because he didn't want to upset them.
Yeah,
right.
And on the one hand, he was quite social, but on the other hand, he found it difficult to form very intimate or close relationships. So he had a lot of acquaintances maybe, and people knew him and he knew them, but he didn't really have anyone who was particularly close.
Right. He didn't have a best buddy.
What about the guy from the Animals?
Well, the guy from the Animals was more of a mentor.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Girlfriends?
There was one who was the most important one, and that was Kate Etchingham. And Kate Etchingham, they met on their first day in London, and then she became probably the most important woman in his life. And but it was her that said, you know, he was at his worst when the fame took over, and when people who hardly knew him suddenly became his best friends. And that's a quote from her. And she was probably the most significant relationship that he had as an adult. But it is also known that he had one child, possibly 2, from other women.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So were they a couple for a few years?
I think they were a couple for a few years, but on and off. But they also remained friends throughout.
He wrote The Wind Cries Mary about her, you know.
Yeah.
Her middle name, Kate Etchingham's middle name was Mary, so he sometimes called her that jokingly.
I always thought that was about pot.
Well, so did we when we were kids. Yeah. Mary Jane.
Makes me think about, you know, Freddie Mercury's lifelong female friend that he had an on-off. Oh, blimey, I can't remember her name now. But there's something about that sort of dependability, that sort of rock-solid female presence.
Maybe a surrogate mother.
Or a late-stage transitional object.
Yeah, but he would have been looking for a mother figure, I guess, as much as a father figure. And I think he found the father figure in Chad Channing. Yeah.
So he was good for him, by the sounds.
By all accounts, yeah.
Sounds like it. You brought him over, introduced him to loads of people, got him on stage with Eric Clapton, probably got him a record deal with Kit Lambert and his mate.
Actually, they parted ways because of all the tension in the studio and the chaos that was going on.
Right.
And it was around this time when amphetamines were coming into the picture.
Yeah.
So there were drugs and alcohol on the scene for Jimmy.
So hang on, that reminds me of Nick Shymansky and Amy Winehouse, losing somebody who was a really good, strong influence and a grounding influence as well. Wow.
Yeah. Do you think he maybe thought, I can't deal with this, this is getting a bit out of hand?
Yeah. Again, we could even go so far as to say there may have been an unconscious reenactment. So the experience of losing a parent sometimes causes people to get into relationships with surrogate parents that then aren't able to fulfill that duty.
Yeah.
So they were on crazy schedules and it was all getting a bit hectic.
This is touring schedules.
Touring schedules, recording schedules, you know, everything, I think. I imagine there would have been press too. And then unfortunately, all of it became too much for the band and then they disbanded in 1969.
I mean, that's such a common theme still, unfortunately, in 2024, as we are recording this, that touring schedules are still, and promo schedules, are just still fucking relentless for bands.
Yeah, they're mad, aren't they?
Yeah, and I still work with a lot of bands, and the thing that they all have in common is fairly unmanageable touring schedules and not a lot of relief during the tour.
Yeah.
And it's obviously it's very tempting, and the long, long hours of boredom kind of in between either traveling or waiting for gigs. There's normally like 5 or 6 hours between a sound check and a stage time.
Yeah.
And that really opening the door for a lot of things that will become destructive, you know, alcohol, drugs, etc.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I used to do, for Razorlight, I used to do their diary.
Oh, right.
So when they were going on tour or when, you know, whatever. So I used to have to take calls from record company, any kind of interested parties. You know, they're in New York for 48 hours. We need them to see this magazine. We need them to do that radio show. You know, and there's always this kind of fear that if you don't maximise on the time that the band have got in that particular area to see the important people, then you're going to miss out. So it's quite fear generated and you get quite anxious. Yeah. So, you know, it's quite anxiety provoking.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it does take quite a big... I don't know, personality or I don't know, something.
Boundaries, maybe?
Yeah, an awareness of what sort of impact this is going to have on the band to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that we're trying to achieve with this podcast is kind of bring a greater awareness to these things and also to get across the message that it is possible to tour and to do quite demanding tours and yet look after yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
And also, you know, if you don't allow people to be able to switch off,
yeah,
they're going to go mad.
And also, I mean, surely good mental health is proportional to productivity anyway.
It is absolutely,
you know.
Yeah, but there's sometimes a tiny bit of a short-sightedness. Not that that's deliberate, but it's kind of there's such a focus on what's in front of you to be done, and the fact that if you don't do it, you might miss out on the opportunity, and therefore not be successful. That people tend to generally push that to one side.
Yeah, and I guess we can all be victims to that way of thinking, but ultimately. If we look after ourselves, then we can achieve more. So just moving on with Jimmy's story, he, you know, we talked about the alcohol, then the amphetamines coming in, but then all the LSD came in, you know, sometime around, you know, 67. And by 69, he was smoking a lot of dope and, you know, even cocaine was there. And, you know, I had a tutor once when I was studying music called Sheila Whiteley, who wrote a book called The Space Between the Notes. And it was a kind of comparing like Jimi Hendrix's music and even some of his solos to like LSD trips, or that's kind of trying to. It was the theory, I suppose, was that the trips that he had perhaps were coming out in his music.
Right.
Now, you know, I've always sort of held the belief that, you know, drug use or drug experiences can enhance creativity to a certain extent, but addictive or regular use of drugs generally inhibits creativity.
Absolutely.
That's what I've seen. That's my experience. And I think that's what was starting to happen with Jimmy. He was getting more going more towards the drugs, and unfortunately that was taking him away from his creativity.
And so was his ability to perform and write songs and record songs impacted by that, do we know?
Well, there's one famous show apparently in 1970 was playing Madison Square Garden, where he was on drugs and he abandoned the performance halfway through.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because he couldn't keep going. Yeah.
And it's funny that old myth about being extra creative, if you take LSD and loads of drugs, and if you stop doing it, you're not going to be creative anymore. It's kind of like, it's such a load of fucking horse shit.
Yeah,
and it really pisses me off. And the amount of people that I talk to, the amount of musicians that I talk to, and that's their number one fear. And it's their number one reason for not stopping when they're seriously ill and seriously unwell. And, you know, and I point them towards a lot of really shit music that was written under the influence compared to you know, a small amount of really good music that was written under the influence. And the key consistent thing there is that if people continue, invariably the music gets worse. And coming back to Jimmy, it sounds like maybe he, although it might have slightly unlocked or opened a door for him, at the same time he wasn't able to stop because we know that he had alcoholism and therefore addiction in his family history.
Absolutely. Talking of addiction, you know, it's the saddest thing is that for Jimmy, music was really his number one addiction, his love. You know, he said, music makes me high on stage, and that's the truth. It's almost like being addicted to music. You see, on stage, I forget everything, even the pain.
Even the pain. Wow. Okay.
So music was acting in that way for him. It was acting in a way that was, you know, like with many addictions at the beginning, they alleviate our pain. And around this time, Jimmy had become one of the highest paid rock musicians in the world. He was, his 1969 Madison Square Garden concert, he was apparently paid $14,000 a minute. Which, you know, would be a fair amount now, let alone then. But he, you know, someone who spent a lot of his early life in poverty, you know, he was suddenly in a different position. But it became too much for him. You know, he became very disillusioned and he was worried about creating something new. And there's a quote from 1970. He told a journalist, Ryan Hollingworth, that if I don't have anything to communicate through my music, then there is nothing left for me to live for.
Oh, wow. So that says to me that it's all about connection. It's all about communicating with people and connecting with people. And that if you can't do that,
what's the point?
Right.
I'm also thinking about, you know, I mean, he's still a kid, isn't he? He's 26, 27. You think about all of those extraordinary factors that are coming at him at the same time. You know, money, what do I do with it? You know, fame, absolute head fuck. Travelling all over the world. I mean, you know, it's everyone wanting a piece of you. I mean, anybody with a decent... good enough upbringing would find that stressful.
He didn't have the personal resources to hold him through it.
No, absolutely no chance.
At all. And unfortunately, it was 1970 when he was 27. He's part of the 27 Club, and he had accidentally asphyxiated on his own vomit, and it was barbiturates.
So he choked on his own vomit, in other words, while drinking, presumably, and high on barbiturates.
Well, the barbiturates have been recorded, but yes, there was probably alcohol involved too.
I think that was Ladbroke Grove, wasn't it not?
Still around there.
I think that's where we used to hang out,
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the 27 Club, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's just something, it's a bit of hype really, and it's just something that someone pulled together at some point. However, there is an uncanny amount of, you know, famous musicians who have died. Some, you know, Kurt Cobain and Amy, who we've spoken about, who died at 27.
And Brian Jones.
And Brian Jones as well, yeah. So there's something about that age that perhaps makes people more vulnerable to, I don't know, the excesses that can lead to a fatal overdose or dying.
Or is it the age, the kind of the average age where maybe the talent becomes the prison, as we like to say? And actually, the kind of, you know, with Jimi Hendrix, certainly it looks like he was doing a lot more self-medicating because he'd stopped enjoying. Because what had once upon a time been his transitional object was now the way that he had to earn his career.
It was an anchor around his neck. manic. Yeah. And there's a desire to escape, more of a desire to escape, the pressure of the current moment. But the thing that really, I think, upsets me most about Jimi Hendrix is, what a waste of what amazing talent. Going back to my very first point, and can you imagine if he'd lived and the music he could have gone on to do? I mean, it's just gone.
Do we know if there were any attempts to help him?
I don't know, actually. I don't think he had become overtly problematic to the point where people had thought something bad's going to happen. That's what it seems to be.
So he was on the wild child side of things, rather than the God, there's something really badly wrong
he's a complete
here
mess type
side
thing.
of things. And so presumably that he was just allowed to get on with it because he was Jimi Hendrix. And that's what Jimi Hendrix does.
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely Jimmy. Sweet little Jimmy. Beautiful Jimmy.
Do you feel like you've got to know him a bit better, Sam?
Do you know, the weird thing is I don't. And I'm wondering if that is because there wasn't a huge sense of self.
Yeah. I don't think he got to know himself.
Yeah. After all that I've listened and heard you talk about, I feel quite detached from him.
Yeah. There's so much there in the music, but I don't think he ever formed a secure attachment. And I think it's only through secure attachments that we really learn who we are,
Or maybe we didn't get a chance to know.
Yeah. Take it away too soon.
Yeah. So where would you like to leave Jimmy, Chula?
I think I'd like to leave him at Woodstock, doing that Star-Spangled Banner, because a bit like with Whitney, it's such a moment in history and a triumphant moment for people of African American and Native American heritage, to have a man up there, playing the Star-Spangled Banner, completely destroying it on every level.
Absolutely.
It's just somewhere where I'd like to remember him.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
What an achievement.
Iconic.
Yes.
And we're not using that word lightly in this instance, are we?
No,
Performance
absolutely not.
At Woodstock, who, of course, Jimmy, then you went to inspire Prince and probably countless others who were there to do and be what they were meant to be.
I don't think there's a guitarist on this earth who wouldn't say that they were somewhat influenced by Jimi Hendrix.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really?
Everyone says it.
Yeah. So thank you for your talent. Thank you for your bravery and your courage and coming to London and seeing what else was possible. And it's been a real privilege to listen to your story. Thank you, Chula.
Thank you, Chula.
And
Pleasure.
we'll leave you at Woodstock.
So, Chula, do you have a one for the road for us?
I do indeed have a one for the road. And I think it's going to be the album, Electric Ladyland.
Okay.
It's one of my favourite albums ever and deeply influenced my musical tastes and how I connected with music. So, and if you haven't heard it, go out and listen to it.
Thanks, Chula. And that's it, guys. We're done for another season.
Yeah, we're done.
Can't believe it already. I mean, it's been a yet another roller coaster.
Yeah.
And I think this season, almost more than last season, I've got to know a lot more about myself, a lot more about you guys, and of course, a lot more about the 6 people that we've talked about and hopefully held. And thank you to everybody who's listened and supported us in this experience.
Yeah. What amazing stories.
Absolutely amazing stories. And I think for me, it's been kind of a real, every stories have had a sort of slightly different flavour. So there might have been more sort of vicious. There was a really interesting social climate going on with Prince. There was definitely a sort of, there was the light and shade. With DMX, it felt very heavy, but I don't know how else it could have been. With Amy, there was a real sense of tragedy around her. And I think I I mean, I could just do this all day long. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and good art or music is definitely, it's a representation of the human experience, and it's been so humbling for me to learn about these people because, I think I know about them and I think I know what's behind their stories, but the way we've unpicked them, there's been so much that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So much.
Mm-hmm. And guess finally, we want to say thank you to London Records for sponsoring us.
Thank you, London Records.
Yeah,
yeah, very much so.
Yeah, very much.
I used to work there,
Did you?
Really?
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's an added bonus.
Yeah, nice.
For me.
I've been working with London Records for over the past sort of year, working with some of their artists and some of the staff. And it's been a real pleasure. This new iteration of the label really does put mental health for their artists in particular front and centre. And so it was a real joy for them to agree to sponsor us.
And they're the kind of people we want to work with.
Yeah.
So if you're that kind of person, give us a call.
Yeah, please do.
And thank you for listening, most of all. And thank you to the team. Thank you to Emma, Ethan and Harry in the studio, and Kirsty, who organises us, and to Chula and to Sam. What a joy it has been working with you all. And hopefully we'll see you for season 3 in just a few short months.
Take care.
Thank you. And if you've enjoyed Empathy for the Devil, why not check out Hit That Perfect Beat, the London Records story, a deep dive into the iconic label behind some of the biggest hits of the last 50 years. See our show notes for more details.